Track record with e-commerce, Tung manages $13 billion plus companies in his portfolio today. Most recently, he has ranged to Latin America, where he backed the mobility startup Yellow in September 2018. Hugo Barra is the Vice President of Virtual Reality at Facebook, heading the Oculus team. Prior to Facebook, Hugo was Vice President of Xiaomi, the world's fourth largest smartphone manufacturer. Hugo is a veteran of Silicon Valley, where he worked for many years as Vice President of the Google, overseeing the Google development of the Android operating system. Hugo went to MIT and graduated in electrical engineering and computer science. He's originally from Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais. Please join me in welcoming Hans Tung and Hugo Barra.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hans is still working on his Portuguese. He promised he's going to do it in Portuguese next year. But today is going to be in English. I hope that's okay with you all. And so thank you, Hans, for joining us. Hans has such a busy schedule. He was speaking at a conference in Stanford, then he went straight to a Bloomberg TV live interview, and now he's here with us. So we're really honored and proud to have you here, Hans. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So I thought that it'd be kind of fun to start with an image that I'm going to pull up in a second, which is the answer that I give when people ask me, why did you move to China? I moved to China about 6 years ago for 4 years, and it was kind of a crazy decision, especially I think back then, perhaps less so today. And people ask me, so why did you move to China? And the answer that I give to that question is this image that we're going to show right now. I see it down here, but not up there, guys. There you go. So take a look at this. There's a circle, and inside their circle, there are more people than outside of it. It's actually about 50-50. So just look at that. We're obviously living outside that circle. We're outside that circle right now. But it's pretty incredible to put this in perspective, right? What's going on in the world and how little of it we know of, how little of it we participate in. And so this is why moving to China or India or Southeast Asia is such an incredible life experience. The funny thing is that this whole thing for me started, when was that?
2006.
13 years ago.
Before you joined Google.
So before I joined Google, I went on a trip to China, where I had the privilege and pleasure to meet a very young Hans.
And I'm going to have a surprise for you. We have a photo from 2006. Can
No
we
way.
cue that up?
What? Oh shit! Look at this.
I was a model back then. I wasn't a VC. I couldn't hack that job. That's why I'm doing my job now.
Okay, well, so this is in Shanghai, right?
This is in Shanghai, in Puxi. Yes, T8 is the restaurant. Fantastic restaurant.
And so this was a learning trip in 2006, and there's a very young version of the still very young JP is here as well. Where's JP? Oh, he's back there. And so this was an incredible learning trip, and Hans was already investing back then. We'd love to hear a bit about your history, Hans, and then we'll get into this.
Sure. I was born in Taiwan, grew up in LA, came to Stanford for college, and I think Peter Thiel was only 2 years ahead of me, and the whole PayPal mafia, I probably know half of them from just hanging out at different fraternity parties. And then fast forward to 2005, a year before I met Hugo, I moved to China thinking that China could be the next big thing. A lot of similar talks about Brazil today is what we heard about China 10 years ago. And then GGV, the firm I'm with now, invested in this little company in 2003 called Alibaba. And the valuation back then was extremely expensive, $180 million.
Damn.
And today, what's the market cap of Alibaba? $500 billion. So from 2003 to now, 15 years later, 180 million to half a trillion. Now, we were not smart. We sold most of it 5 years ago, thinking that I already peaked at 33 billion. So we'll have 10x on the table. But that just tells you that the power of internet and tech, when it can actually make a difference in society and changing the way people work, live, the leg that it has, the upside, the promise, is a lot bigger than most people give it credit for.
So the goal, of course, of this panel is to share information that's relevant for us Brazilians in the room. And we're going to talk about Hans's journey into Brazil in a second. What I'd love to start with, Hans, is we're going to explore your frameworks here. You know, a lot of business folks here, we want to steal your frameworks. So I would love to start with your global framework. And I'd love to hear about how you as a global investor who knows China and other markets so well, how do you think about Brazil in the overall context of tech globally? Like, what's your framework for thinking about Brazil?
I think in this area, you and I are quite similar. Obviously, a lot of innovation for internet came out of this place, even though browser was invented in Illinois in '93, but really Netscape took off here. And then China started happening immediately after, but a lot of people here thought China was just copying, cloning, whatever works here, it just copied the same thing over there. But since 2000, after the internet bubble bursted, what we saw in China was that there's a lot more innovation that are happening on the ground that fits domestic economy and conditions. Alibaba was competing against eBay. eBay said it was going to crush China in 2005, the year before Hugo went there. Yet eBay had about $50 billion in market cap, and Alibaba was only $5 billion, 1/10 of the size. Yet Alibaba came out with innovative business models in China that fit the needs of a mass market. So the first thing that Americans tend not to think about is that mass market users worldwide don't live in Pacific Heights, don't live in Atherton, don't live in Upper East Side. So you have to come up with a thing that fits their needs. So you maybe have an Uber Black that has a lot of branding and interest and great service, but it wasn't until Uber X come along and become a big company. So the first thing we learned was mass market. That was important. And you and I went through Xiaomi together, so we know the power of mass market too.
And still on the global topic, I'd love to understand kind of where does Brazil fit in the timeline of tech relative to the rest of the world? How do you see that?
You look at China, PC internet really boomed from 2000 2010. And then around 2010, when I invested in Xiaomi, from day one, smartphones started to take off. iPhone was announced in 2006, launched in January 2007. Next 3 years, China started to see what was happening with smartphone in the US, and then more domestic brands came out in 2009, 2010. And then you look at, by the time Alibaba went IPO in 2014, India started to become the next big thing. At the same time, Indonesia in Southeast Asia become the next big thing. As those two were happening, LATAM went through its period of transitions. And we think that right now is the perfect time for LATAM, specifically Brazil, to do a lot better. Because you look at smartphone penetration, it's 50%. You have over 100 million users using a smartphone, and then the GDP per capita is roughly about 8,000, 9,000, similar to China. So we think that it's the right time to build interesting digitally native business in Brazil now.
So Hans, I think you're saying that Brazil is the next big thing from
Absolutely.
Your perspective as an investor.
Correct. And you look at the quality of the founders, quality of the VCs. I've been extremely impressed in just the last 12 months interacting with so many founders from Brazil. Many of them know their Chinese counterparts, know the lingo, know the numbers. They visit China already. When it comes to the VCs, the Monashis, the Kazakhs, that are so knowledgeable and smart and just very thoughtful that I'm very bullish on where Brazil and Latin in general could be over the next decade.
All right, you heard it here first from Hans directly. Brazil is the next big thing. All right. So now we're going to come back to Brazil in a second. I want to take a nice long trip to China with you here, Hans. Back to frameworks. I'd love to talk about, and I'd love for us to hear about your current framework for tech in China. Like what's going on in tech in China? You know, give us the pillars, give us the buckets, how you see it.
Three things. What we see, probably the most disruptive things online to offline, O2O. You're seeing online business models expanding into offline world. You see Alibaba launched Tung to help mom and pop convenience stores to rebrand itself, to have SaaS, to learn how to control, manage inventory well. You see demand aggregation. You see companies like Pinduoduo that leverage WeChat to aggregate demand from your friends in order to have large quantities of orders done and get best prices from suppliers. You see different community-based group purchase group buy apps happening in China. We're invested in one called Ningwaning, which means that in China there are communities where you have each building has 50 floors, each floor has 6 units. You have about 20 such buildings in a community. So you have 10,000 people living very closely together with each other, high population density. Then you have people leveraging WeChat to aggregate demand almost building by building. And then so when you do delivery, it's extremely efficient because you ship large delivery in fewer deliveries and yet more quantity, so it's more efficient overall. We also see aggregation of supply. How do you get leveraging WeChat and internet to bypass the middleman so you connect the farmers to the consumers directly, seeing models like Meicai happening. So when we this O2O, where it's online to offline, we see demand aggregation like a Pinduoduo or Ningwaning, or supply aggregation like Meicai. Things are happening in a way that increase a lot of efficiency into the system, and we're seeing that happening not just in China, but in Southeast Asia, India, and Latin as well.
Okay, so O2O, demand aggregation, and supply aggregation.
Yeah.
I'd love to maybe dive into at least 2 of those, maybe the first 2, with a few good examples. One of the things that I thought from my experience in China was very interesting is just how thoughtfully designed these apps are, these services are, not necessarily in terms of the polish, but in terms of functionality.
Right.
So I would love to dive into this. So let's talk about O2O, and Hans, if you will, walk us slowly through a really good example.
Right. I think you nailed it. Chinese app tend to be less polished, very functional, very busy, and the US app tend to be not as functional, very focused, and very pretty.
Yeah.
And so the Chinese user will look at American app, goes, man, there's not much there at all. What do you do? There's only like 1, 2 things you can do. And the US user look at Chinese app, oh my God, I'm so busy. It's way too messy. I don't know what to do. Too many things, too many choices. So it is very interesting to see how users from 2 places are trained very differently over a 10-year period.
You know what's interesting though? Yeah, I do want to hear your example on O2O. Let's pick a company and talk about one company as an example. But I think if you look at, especially like the delivery apps in Brazil now, man, they look so Chinese.
Yes, they do.
Right?
I think they're beautiful and they're very functional.
I love them.
So it's great.
Yeah. So let's go O2O. Give us an example, one company.
You know it well, Meituan.
Let's talk about Meituan.
Meituan is a super app. If you look at the way Meituan's designed, you see Yelp, you see Uber Eats, you see Expedia. You also see some social networking as well. So it's all kind of combined into one.
In one app.
In one app. So
that's a super app?
It's a super app.
Okay.
Not only on the B2C side, it's also on the B2B side because it offers a SaaS product to make easier for the restaurants to do ordering to booking as well. So it's both B2C as well as B2B. And so there's a demand aggregation, also as supply disintermediation, so go directly to the vendors. So when you see these kind of super app emerging, it's like, wow, this is not just going to work in China, in other places too. Because around the world is so inefficient in the offline world that with internet and cloud and tech, you can do so much more. And when founders from Brazil go to Latin America, to China, what was interesting is that the difference in scale is dramatic. So in Latin, most of the top delivery apps can probably do 20 to 30 million orders a month. And in China, if you say I'm doing 20 million orders, the response from Meituan is like, oh, a day? So the scale is very different. But I don't get discouraged because that just means that there's just so much more growth possible for top players in Latin. So I don't worry about the fighting or the capital intensity or the hash burning as much because the penetration, there's just a lot of room for it. That over time you can amortize and win.
So staying in the O2O online to offline category for a second, and maybe we can stay with Meituan if you like. Can you give us specific examples of the things that these companies did to build infrastructure and unique differentiation? We can talk about deliveries, we can talk about other things, but like the moats that these guys built. Just tell us about the moats.
If the one thing I look at what happened in China that changed it all, up until 2005, there was a lot of traffic and no monetization. Remind us a lot of India just a few years ago. Just a lot of people using apps, nobody was willing to pay for anything. So it was extremely pessimistic in China that China ever have an internet sector of its own. One thing that changed the course, the history, was Alipay. So if I'm selling something to Hugo's like, this is just another Chinese dude trying to sell me some crap. How would I know that if I pay for it, Hans will actually deliver to me? So if he put money into his Alipay account, I saw that a notification from Alipay that his money is already in the account. So I know that it's in a secure place. If I ship the goods to him, he doesn't complain. 7 days later, the money will be released from his Alipay account into mine. So I don't even know who he is. It doesn't matter if he has a credit card or not. We can do a transaction. And so when that happens, and Alipay is not charging me any money for doing this. So of course, more and more people like me, sellers or manufacturers, will get on Alibaba platform to sell more goods. As there are more people like me, more Hugo will show up. So that's how Alibaba changed the entire internet game in China with now monetization and with transaction services. And how does Alibaba make money from me? Well, there's going to be a lot of me over the next 2 years. So if I want to differentiate, not only do I need to have good service, so Hugo write me a good review, but at the same time, I also need to make sure that I have to place ads with Alibaba so that my placement ranking will be higher. So I'm willing to spend money because I'm paying for results. This is much better than eBay just take 15% of everything I do without doing any work at all. So
Win-win.
So this is how China changed, and we see that same philosophy being applied in other emerging markets, including Latin.
Hans, one of the things that really blew my mind when I was living in China is logistics and sort of logistics infrastructure in general.
Yes.
So I kind of want to stay on this topic of building moats in the O2O category for a second, and I would love it if you could give this crew here a picture of what logistics looks like in China, because it's certainly way more impressive than here. So just
when I first moved to China in 2005, year before you came, I ordered something on Taobao. It takes over a week for it to deliver, and I live in Shanghai, the best, most probably modern city in China, arguably. Fast forward today, if I order something on Taobao in Shanghai, I can have it delivered in 1 hour. Most places in Shanghai can deliver within 3 hours. If I'm living 3 miles from Hema, their superstore, is delivered in 30 minutes. You cannot get that kind of service in Amazon in the US at all.
Is Fred Trajano here? He was talking yesterday about 12-12. I think we need to come up with a catchy name for it, but 12-12 versus 1 hour delivery.
So it's amazing what has been, and you look at inside the warehouse for JD or for Ali, you see robots everywhere. It's extremely automated. And this is not just a China phenomenon. I was visiting Lockheed's warehouse in outside of São Paulo, and I see there robots from India, from Beijing, and from Germany. So this spread is happening not just in China, but almost everywhere in large economies now.
And the robots were all talking to each other. All right.
It will happen in the next phase. But right now, it is interesting that see that it is automated. So you don't have to worry about the efficiency of the workforce as much.
Yeah.
Once you have the right robots, you have the right capital, the right funder, you can make things happen.
I have 2 quick stories on logistics. One, I'm pretty sure is real. The second one, I think, is fake news, but I think we all want to believe it, and I believe in it because it just sounds like something that would happen in China. The first story is that the delivery guy from SF Express, the UPS equivalent in China, had a badge for the office door. When I was at Xiaomi, we had this massive building, and the delivery guy had a badge, an employee, and he would actually deliver packages to your desk. So if you ordered, maybe not for every employee, but certainly for the ones that he knew, you would actually get the package on your desk. And it wasn't that he made it to some delivery room, and then from there somebody brought it over to your desk. No, the UPS guy just came to your desk directly. So I thought that was pretty entertaining. The second one, which I think is fake news, but Hans is here to keep me real or not, is this plan that I heard from the Chinese government for drone delivery. Right. So, Beijing has this highway system that are called the ring roads. So they're a bunch of concentric ring roads that go around the city, like Avenida Contorno in Belo Horizonte. Avenida Contorno is much prettier, I should say. And so the Avenida Contorno of Beijing, there's a few of them. I heard that they were planning to build a drone delivery system that used the ring roads, that flew the drones on top of the highway as like an imaginary airway for drone delivery, and that you could even have multiple levels so that they could like transit really fast, somewhere in the city, and then of course they would get off and then maybe go for a last mile thing. I don't think it's true, but it sounds like China, doesn't it?
It sounds plausible, but I don't know if it's true or not.
I have heard that there's a drone air traffic control system being built.
It's being built, that's right.
That's true.
DJI is doing an amazing job. So you probably will see something like that maybe run by private enterprises going forward.
Centralized drone air traffic control. You heard it here first.
When I was in China, when I first moved there, that's when high-speed rail was about to get built. And China had a lot of issues with regulation and different interest groups that don't want to see high-speed rail getting built because that means the existing structure would be outdated. So companies that run that with Chinese government money would be pushed aside. Yet it still happened. And now, whereas in Tokyo, there are 37 million people that have rights in Tokyo to work every day. In China, when you have a Chinese New Year, 500 million people get on the high-speed rail to go home. And it used to take 10 hours, 12 hours, packed. Now is only 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and is Japanese-level quality in terms of cleanness. So the changes happening in just 10 years was just dramatic.
Amazing. All right, I'd love to move on to the second category, which we talked about demand aggregation.
Yeah.
Same question. We'd love to hear one cool example, one impressive example of one company that's doing demand aggregation.
Pinduoduo was a perfect example. This is a company that started about 6 years ago, and then 3 years ago emerged to focus on what they call Pinduoduo. And 3 years later, 6 years after it got started, it went public on NASDAQ, and the valuation now is about $30 billion, US dollars market cap. And the growth has been just phenomenal. It's over $1 billion in net revenue that happened in literally just 3 years. What it does is that if you look at a product that you want to buy, there are two prices. There's a price that's the list price. That if you want a cheaper price, you click on it, click on the offer, it'll kick you into WeChat, into your WeChat friends list. You're going to pick your friends, including Hugo, grab them. If I can get 5 people to do this purchase with me, I can get the cheaper price. So you're very incentivized to spend time paying your friends to make sure that they do this with you. Paying means aggregate. Paying means the group purchase. So you see the difference, the impact of what group purchase can do because you see two prices. But they do it in a way not just functional, like the way Amazon is, but they turn to a game so that see who can do the most number of such group purchase a day. There's a leaderboard that gets you want to spend time to rise up and show off to your friends how smart a shopper you are. So it turns shopping to something like a game, gamifies it, so that you have more fun doing it. And sometimes you don't really need an extra diaper or an extra paper towel, but the fact that you got a good deal makes you feel very good. So it's Costco on steroids. How cool is that?
It's I remember talking about Dutch auction way back in the day. Chinese auction is where it's at.
Yeah.
All right.
And now we're seeing people in Latin America try to be Pinduoduo of Latin. The challenge they have that most U.S. investors have no idea what Pinduoduo is. So you need someone who understands a model to be able to appreciate the beauty of what's being done, what could be done in Latin America.
Before we move on to another topic, is there outside of these two areas, the demand aggregation and O2O, is there a company that you're just dying to talk about because you're so impressed by what they've accomplished in China?
I think DJI is besides Xiaomi, which means we'll be biased.
I was hoping for more internet stuff.
More internet stuff.
More relatable for this crowd.
I think that besides this company in Shanghai, maybe most people here don't know, it's called Xiaohongshu, Little Red Book. We invested since 2014, and its revenue also grew similarly to Pinduoduo, but it is more social. What it does is that a lot of Chinese consumers start traveling to Hong Kong, to Tokyo, to Seoul, and then to Milan, to New York, to see the world and to buy stuff. A lot of the Japanese tourists in the 80s. What's different from that is that now these are younger consumers and they love to show off. Instead of using Instagram to show off, they go on Xiaohongshu to do it. And not only do they share content, they help other users to buy stuff as well. They don't get a cut, but the app is designed for you to feel good with all the hearts and likes, and there's leaderboard as well to get you on to be the best amongst your circle of friends who just know more about what's cool, what's interesting around the world. So to be popular and to be recognized as an expert becomes the intrinsic motivation without Xiaohongshu having to pay any money to allow users to show off what they know. And now it has, it started in 2014, it has close to 20 million in DAU, not MAU, DAU, 20 million in literally just 4 or 5 years.
What's DAU?
What's that?
What's DAU?
Daily unique users, visitors. And so it's just interesting to see MAU is probably 3x that. So it's just interesting that something that's more high-end, that's more aspirational, gets a lot more clicks that you would think from a country like China. So I just find it fascinating to see more social marry into e-commerce or vice versa in a way that we don't see it in developed countries like US.
Wonderful. I'm going to change topics, and we're going to not do justice to a very important topic because we won't give it much time. But the people in the U.S. and around the world are talking about AI a lot, and AI in China, particularly after Kai-Fu Lee's book, which I highly recommend. I'd love to get a perspective from you, for this crew also that's starting to learn about China, about AI and what AI and machine learning means in China, the approach that they're taking, why that's unique and different, etc. If it is.
Yes. I think that in China, face recognition is such a strong thing, not just by private enterprises, but on the government side as well. So that at the expense trade-off of personal privacy, pretty much every person's photo, the government has it from the personal ID, and it gets trained on you when you're using TikTok, when you're using variety of short-form video apps, so that every company is very good at leveraging the data they get to train up on facial recognition. And when you match that with shopping, you can go to a mall that Alibaba runs. Based on just who you are, they can quickly tell what are your user taste, so that if you want the right car or the right phones, based on your purchase history, they can recommend something that they know you will like extremely quickly. So just based on the volume of data that Alibaba and Tencent has, they can come up with offers that's much more personalized and well-suited. Just have put it in scale. When Alibaba runs their Double 11 promotions, each minute, millions of transactions are done in matter of each second. So each second it's about 5-10 million. The number goes up every year. So that the most recent Double 11 promotion last year, I think number was around over $25 billion were transacted in one day. And put it in perspective, that's bigger than the entire Black Friday and Cyber Monday in the US between Thanksgiving and early Christmas.
I'm going to hold myself from asking a follow-up question on this AI topic because I wanted to move into other things. I want to go back to learning lessons from China for Brazil. There's a lot of startup founders here, many of whom, if not all of them, have already spent time in China. And one of the topics that always comes up is, damn, these people work so hard. There was an article on South China Morning Post a couple of weeks ago with a headline, "No sleep, no sex, no life. The plight of tech workers in China's Silicon Valley." Is that true?
I can't comment on no sex part. That I don't know. I'm pretty happy, so I can't complain. On the issue of long hours, it is definitely long hours. There's no question about it. You work at Xiaomi, you know. I remember investing in Beijing in 2010. I went to see him at 11 o'clock at night.
That's the CEO of Xiaomi, yeah?
As the CEO of Xiaomi, the founder of Xiaomi. And I think that 90% of the people were still there at 11 o'clock at night. and there were two people in front of me that I need to wait until they finish releasing before I can meet them. So people talk about 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That's the typical work schedule for tech companies in China. But I think that most of the founders do 007, pretty much work all the time. And you think, I don't think it's a Chinese
Did you say
phenomenon.
007?
007. Midnight to midnight, 7 days a week. Someone's sleeping in the office. But I don't think that's just a China phenomenon. When I look at like Rappi, the way they grow out of Colombia and throughout Latam, when I look at Swiggy in India or Grab and Gojek in Southeast Asia, I think the founders who are driven worldwide are extremely similar to each other.
And how important do you think that is? Do you believe fundamentally that working harder or significantly harder than the sort of average business worker is a necessary thing for your success as a startup founder?
In the Valley, it's always about work-life balance, and that's highly regarded. It almost implies that if you work hard, that means you're not working efficiently or not working smartly. But I think in China, it's very different. I think the best founders, they work smart and they work hard. They don't treat the two as being exclusive to each other.
I want to talk about the role of government a little bit. From my understanding and my experience, there's quite a bit of myth and a little bit of important reality as well as to the role that the Chinese government has played in strengthening, setting up for success, the tech ecosystem in China. Educate us.
What people don't know is that government's almost like a business too. In order to get government grants, in order to get government to support you, you have to develop a 2G model, business to government model, and know how to do that very well in order to get that kind of support. Most companies are good at B2C to figure out a way that consumers to be interested. They're not as good in B2G, and they don't spend as much effort. They know they have to do it, but that's not what drives them. They spend a lot more time figuring out how to get users to be delighted with what they offer. So even with Xiaomi, I think the government didn't realize Xiaomi is the next big thing until 2-3 years into it. So sure, they had government banks that give them loans at lower interest rate, but this is after Xiaomi have already become proven. And so in China, I think it's extremely meritocracy driven that the best companies, the first 2-3 years, you really do it by yourself. And it's through fast iterations, through hard work, that you get the consumers to believe in you, like you, and grow with you. If Xiaomi did not update its OS every single week for the last 9 years, there's no way that the critical users in China would accept Xiaomi phone.
If you could become the Brazilian government, with a snap of a finger, or the government of any of these nations, could be Indonesia, that are seeing these startup ecosystems beginning to flourish, what would you do?
I'm not going to presume that I know what to do, but the lessons from China seems to be that if the government focus on infrastructure and not get all the way from the businesses and not interfere with them too much, allow them to innovate first, make mistakes, and then correct them later, interesting things happen. A lot of people make fun of the photos of mountain bikes that Ofo and Mobike dumped in China. But for us, when we look at it, it also means that the Chinese government was willing to let innovation happen first and figure out how to regulate it later. That change of attitude was extremely important for internet to take off in China. I think having the high-speed rail to make it easier, using high-speed rail to build a national consumer market, to make it easier for shipping and delivery to happen, because the infrastructure is better, played a huge role. But I don't think that Chinese internet company grew because of what government did. In fact, Jack Ma tried to partner with the government twice beforehand. Both of them failed miserably. Is when deciding what, I'm not going to depend on anybody, just going to be 18 of us in Hangzhou and figure this out, that he built Alibaba. So this is why I love how the founders in China in the tech world are so focused on being accepted by the customers rather than waste time on the government. It's something they need to do, but it's not what make them successful.
That's great. So I want to now start talking a little bit about your personal journey to Brazil and tell us about the time you've spent there, what you've learned, what you've done. I think you were able to set a new record very quickly with one of your investments. I'd love to hear a bit about it.
I think that
Starting with why also.
right when Didi invested in '99, it caught our attention because for anyone who traveled from China to Sao Paulo, is at least 25 hours. And when Didi was willing to make that journey and make that investment, it made me realize that it has looked at beyond India and Southeast Asia and look further now. And so from that point forward, we started thinking about it. And we don't know much about Brazil or Latin in general. So we know we have to stick to what we know that could be more global. And that's we're going to always be more sector and thesis driven. So we knew mobility, payment, mobile wallet would be a more global phenomenon. So a lot of business models that we thought working in China and to a lesser degree US, we think are very applicable for Latin as a whole. And the second thing is that I think I have to say the quality of VCs and founders in Brazil and Latin in general were extremely impressive. And so if we didn't have the right business partners to work with, I don't think we'll be as comfortable making these kind of investments.
If I got this right, I think GGV and you in particular led the biggest Series A investment in Brazil in history. Is that right?
Yeah, that's in yellow. And then we work with Monashis and Base 10 to help to merge the company with Grin out of Mexico City. And now together as Grow, they're the #1 micromobility platform in Latin.
Why did you guys sort of pressure or articulate this merger?
We saw, as you know, a lot of mergers in China happen between 2010 and 2018. Start with the Youku Tudou merger that my partner Jixun helped to facilitate, and then saw a series of them, Meituan and Dianping, Didi and Kuaidi, Meili and Mogu, and the list goes on. And so when that happened, usually the Chinese founders work 996 or 777 for 3-4 years. You're tired. Not every single one of them want to do that forever. So the #2 guy is willing to cash out, and #1 guy is willing to rule the empire and go for longer. So everyone got something what they want out of it. So they know that it's a win-win, and when you have a merger, it's always bigger than the sum of two parts from before, because now you own the market. You can expand into other businesses now. If you look at Uber versus Lyft, those two pretty much did exactly similar things, with some minor differences. They're very much the same the first few years. But now one is publicly traded at about 20, 25 billion. The other one could be over 100 billion. Why? Two things. One's global. The other one's only in the US. One is in more than one business, not just in ride sharing, but in variety of sharing, plus Uber Eats.
Yep.
The other one is not. And I distinctly remember telling Garrett Camp of Uber, don't fight Didi. Save that money for your Uber Eats. You have to worry about when Amazon and Google come your way. Don't waste money on subsidy. Just merge with the Didi, and you have a bigger stake in a much bigger company, in the largest economy in the world soon. So if you do that across all the emerging markets, it makes the American company much more valuable. So all those lessons we saw merger in China is not just for China. It's actually applicable to the internet sector worldwide.
There you go. We have only a couple more minutes. I'm looking at the questions here and sort of trying to blend them together. You've talked about thesis-based investment. Earlier, you talked about things like demand aggregation and supply aggregation in China. Are there business models that you've seen working in China, or for that matter in other developing markets that you've seen, that you think are like prime for Brazilianization? Like, I want to go build a company in Brazil that does this.
If anybody wants to do live streaming short form video in Brazil, I'll be an investor. I think TikTok and YY and Huya, there's several companies out there that if in China, you're going to have interesting content people want to pay money for. You should be find even more interesting content that's UGC or PGC in the Brazil and Latin. And if not,
no comment.
Then I'm not sure what to say. So the fact that it's already a booming business, Huya is, YY is $10 billion in market cap. And TikTok, ByteDance is $75 billion. I just think that there's great short form video and live stream business that could be built in Latam. And that's just one of many examples.
Thank you. We had a full room like this earlier today with Marcelo Claudi from SoftBank, obviously talking about the new fund and so on and so forth. What do you think of SoftBank's sort of entry into Latin America and Brazil specifically?
We want to see more people like that because in order to grow these unicorns, you need a lot of capital. We saw in China, to have a unicorn, you got to have raised at least $1 billion, if not 10 billion, over time. And you need more people to come in, diversify the risk, and have that capital to grow the business. And if used correctly, it can accelerate change in a much more efficient way than what is possible. And also, it galvanizes and have more people who want to be in this industry. China has about 4.6 million STEM graduates every year. And India is about 2.4 million to 2.5. And in Latin and South Asia is a lot less. So as a whole, need to have more people who want to be engineers instead of being a lawyer or a doctor. Not, and all the professions are fine. It's a personal choice. But to grow unicorns, you need to have more engineers. And to have the parents who want their kids be engineers, the best way to see, wait a second, that kid I know from 10 years ago, he's worth 100x more than my son. What the F is going on? That's usually the best way for people to realize that, hey, startup, internet thing is life-changing.
Great. All right. Would love to close with some Hans words of wisdom. I'd love to hear your advice. We'd love to hear your advice here for sort of three types of folks in this room. What advice do you have to offer our entrepreneurs? What advice do you have to offer our business leaders, the company CEOs, private sector CEOs, and so on? And then what advice do you have to offer investors?
For founders, it is really the best time to build a business today. But in order to do that well, you need to tap to resource data points that has happening around the world. We think there's a positive correlation between how global the founders are in terms of data points and thinking and how fast they can move and execute in any local market. And the second thing is that it's tempting to raise money at a high valuation. I'm a guilty party and I do that. But at the same time, from my experience, I've seen many companies raise a lot of money and they don't do well. How you manage money, how to use money in a thoughtful manner, and how you pace yourself is much more important than actually raising the money. For every Alibaba that did well with money from SoftBank, you also see cautionary tale from Ofo that went bankrupt. And that was a pioneer in a bike sharing market. So both examples can exist. It really depends on how you want to use your time, whether you use that time well. And as for the CEOs, in China, back in 2005, 2010, many non-internet sector CEOs did not care too much about internet because the valuation was crazy. These companies were burning a lot of cash, and most people did not understand it. Today, in China, even the shopping malls are experiencing smaller traffic than before. The shopping malls are being affected by e-commerce. So the power of tech and internet, like how we left 10x on Alibaba on the table for other people, is just a lot bigger than you think. When I moved to China, e-commerce percent of retail in China was less than 0.1%. Today, it's just under 20%, twice the penetration as it is in the US. You can even argue that the power of internet and tech make much bigger impact than in emerging market than it is in the US. Because in the US, offline world is relatively efficient. There's less room for innovation and for need for leapfrogging. In the developing world, is much, much more. So figure out how to partner with folks with internet experience and do that is important. As for VCs, this is the best time right now. Just if you're in a company building mode, not try to gouge the valuations and terms, but really spend time picking the right founder and grow with them. Over the next 10 years, it will be amazing. When you and I went to China, I had no idea. I mean, the Forbes Miners list, it was only 4 VCs of 100 that's Asia-related on that list. Today, there are 25 VCs that's China-related on that list. I think over the next 10 years, you'll see VC from Latin on that list for sure, and they will move up. And so, as much as I hate the local politics that's extremely right-wing and nationalistic in many places around the world, something opposite is happening. Talent, idea, technology and business model is increasingly very global. So if you tap that trend well for the next 10 years, it will be amazing.
Hans, it's been a real pleasure. That was amazing. Thank you very much.